morning, everyone. My name is Simon Hamilton. I'm the Chief Executive of Belfast Chamber, and you're very welcome to this, our fourth and final in our Building Belfast Back Better series. The aim of this series of events over the last 4 weeks has been to shine a spotlight and showcase some of the major infrastructure projects that are in the pipeline in Belfast over the next number of years, and also to highlight how some of our members like Northern Ireland Water are helping to build a sustainable future for Belfast and indeed for the entire region. We've been very pleased at Belfast Chamber to be able to partner with our member, Power NI, to deliver this series of events. I'm very pleased to be able to hand over to Ian Fraser, Key Account Manager at Power NI, to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Simon, and good morning, everyone. Power and I have been delighted to be sponsoring the Building Belfast Back Better series of events. These events, I'm sure you will agree, have been a very welcome tonic to the ongoing environment in which we are all currently living and those fortunate enough to be working in also. These events have certainly provided me with a roadmap as to how Belfast will develop and therefore flourish in the short and medium term, and Power and I look forward very much to being part of that story. A continuing theme across these series of events has been that of sustainability, and in keeping with that event, I'm very pleased to say that Power and I supply Northern Ireland Water, the largest consumer of electricity in Northern Ireland, with 100% renewable energy. For those of you who are interested, please reach out to me to start a conversation as to how Power and I can supply you and your business with 100% sustainable renewable energy. I'm responsible for managing wide range of clients across all sectors of Northern Ireland, and we would welcome the opportunity to have that discussion with you. In the meantime, thank you very much, and back to you, Simon.
Thank you, Ian, and thanks once again to Power and I for your support and your help in making this series of events possible. Thank you very much for that. Our focus for this, our final event in the series, is on the city's water infrastructure, which is a key piece of enabling infrastructure for the city and its growth and its future development and regeneration. We're very fortunate to be joined by Northern Ireland Water's Chief Executive, Sara Venning. Sara will be joined later by Gary Curran, who looks after Northern Ireland Water's developer services, for a question and answer session. You can put questions to Sara. I will be able to put as many as I possibly can to her later on after her presentation. Please use the question and answer function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. But we'll kick off with Sara, who's going to tell us a little bit about how Northern Ireland Water are helping Belfast to build back better. Sara, over to you.
Good morning, Simon, and to all of you who have joined us on the call this morning. I'm absolutely delighted to have been invited here to speak on behalf of Northern Ireland Water. I have to say I'm really intrigued by the level of interest online in the event, and very keen to share our plans with all of you. I'm in the very lucky position as a business leader that everyone on the call will have used my product. However, most people that I meet are blown away by the breadth, size and scale of our operations. So rather than try to describe that for you, I thought I'd share a short video that gives you an insight of what lies behind your water and wastewater production. So these images were all recorded pre-COVID, so you will see some offices full of people. Don't get too nostalgic. So if we could run the video now, Neil, that would be great. that's the flavour of Northern Ireland Water. And one of the privileges of working for a water company is that balance between nature and business. We are the custodians of some of the most breathtakingly beautiful landscapes. So this slide sets out some of what I'd like to talk to you all about this morning, and I am particularly keen to hear from you, so looking forward to those questions at the end. Maybe just start off by taking a minute or two to introduce myself. So I'm Sara Venning. I joined NI Water in 2010. I was Director of Customer Service Delivery, so I have responsibility for all the clean water production, wastewater treatment, all customer contacts, operational and commercial. I became CEO 4 years later, and I have a keen interest in doing things better and streamlining and driving efficiencies and working to be the best that we can be. And I bring that with me to work each day. I've always worked in utilities, so I started off as an engineer with NIE, but I love the water industry. They say in business, defining your purpose is key. Well, to work for an organisation who can lay claim to a purpose of providing the water for life we all rely on to thrive is just amazing. We're about to embark upon our largest ever investment programme, and I'm keen to share what that will mean for you. I'm going to kick off by giving a brief insight into our business and the impact that COVID had, and then go on to talk about the investment programme and the impact that historic underinvestment is having. I also want to explain then some of the steps that we're taking with our local councils and the development community to make sure that we get the most out of the assets that we do have. And then in the second half of my presentation, I'm going to focus on something that is important to us all and a work stream that really cannot be put off or ignored, that of tackling the climate emergency. It may not be an obvious topic for your water company, but actually we believe there are many ways in which we can support Northern Ireland's journey to net carbon zero. We've developed some really interesting thinking, and we are starting to innovate right here in Belfast. So if we can move the slide on. This is Northern Ireland Water on a page, and if we just take a pause for a moment, this slide attempts to capture our entire operations. So in delivering 600 million litres of drinking water every day through some 27,000 kilometres of pipework, we have 24 impounding reservoirs and 23 water treatment works. And you'll have seen some of those in the video, including the very beautiful Silent Valley. The video also showed some of our wastewater treatment works, and our Belfast works is the largest in Northern Ireland was shown. On the wastewater side, we collect 340 million litres of wastewater and convey it through 16,000 kilometres of sewer network. And it is that wastewater network that we're planning to quadruple our investment in the coming 6 years. So as Ian has already mentioned, we are Northern Ireland's largest consumer of electricity, and our electricity bill is over £30 million a year. And we're also Northern Ireland's second largest landowner. So if we move on, it really is tragic to know that the UK now has had over 100,000 deaths from this virus. This time last year, when we first started to hear about the virus, we dusted down our pandemic contingency plan. But really, we couldn't have anticipated all that we've had to deal with as individuals and as business leaders. As an essential service provider, I guess we had two sets of considerations, looking after our team and then looking after customers by ensuring that continuity of service. I guess my reflection is, because we were a public health utility, we had invested quite a lot of time and effort into our risk management frameworks. So that transition from office to home was fairly seamless for us. The IT team pulled out all the stops and we were up and running immediately. And to be fair, in the first wave, we didn't see very many incidents of illness or indeed isolation. But we are seeing a little more of that now in our workforce and their immediate families. If I move to the next slide. Northern Ireland Water has over 1,300 employees, but over 500 of them can't work from home. They work in our laboratories, ensuring water quality and wastewater compliance, and they run our water treatment works, our wastewater treatment works, and the two networks. So this montage of photos shows our telemetry operators being separated out to keep them safe. It shows some of the operators in our water treatment works. You can see our leakage technicians with a big listening stick, some of our lab staff, and even our water technicians there delivering bottled water into Altnagelvin Hospital when the hospital had to close down their water coolers. It probably is hard to remember as you look out your windows now, but when lockdown first happened back in March, the weather was so nice and the country took off in gardening and other outdoor hobbies and general cleaning. Water usage soared, and actually we came close in June to the demand for water here in Northern Ireland, outstripping our ability in the water treatment works to treat it. And then following that demand surge, the dry weather persisted, and actually it was looking like a hosepipe ban might be needed in order to protect those outdoor reservoirs. So the Silent Valley itself was very, very low. However, as always with Northern Ireland, eventually the rains came and order was restored. If I move on to the next slide. So this is our capital works programme. We in Northern Ireland Water have a huge asset base, and we've been investing on average £150 million per year in maintaining and in enhancing those assets. In the initial lockdown, all our sites closed, but rather than a 1 or 2 month closure, which we thought at the time, it was more like a 1 or 2 week closure. And we worked very closely with our supply chain to get our sites opened up again and COVID compliant work practices established. It is really easy to underestimate the size and complexity of the engineering works that our teams carry out. So this slide, 3 photographs, shows pumps being installed for a flood alleviation scheme in South Belfast. And the middle picture is a large storm tank that is built to alleviate flood risk in Ballymena. And then on the right-hand side, you can see a really interesting feat of engineering, which is currently under construction along the coastal path in Bangor. So we've been building a very large concrete stormwater tank. Initially, all the concrete is poured above ground and the tank is above ground, and then it is sunk into the ground by digging all out the soil below it and sinking it down. So when it's finished, it'll be underground and not visible as you walk past. And this year, even given COVID, we will have invested £170 million in infrastructure here in Northern Ireland. If we could move on. But £170 million in 1 year is nowhere near the amount of investment that is needed to address all the infrastructure needs, with the deficit apparent most acutely in our wastewater network. So Northern Ireland Water is what's known as a non-departmental public body, which really in essence means that we can only invest in line with allocations set by the Northern Ireland Executive. And those allocations score against what you might hear people call the block grant. And over the past 10 plus years, our local government in Northern Ireland hasn't made the level of investment needed available. The money that was made available has gone into ensuring that our public water supply is safe, and so we haven't been able to grow the wastewater treatment capacity or the wastewater networks. And that infrastructure is vital in supporting economic growth. And so the current investment profile simply isn't sustainable. If we could move to the next slide. You may well all be familiar with these maps, and the first with the red dots shows all the areas in Northern Ireland where we are either at or nearing capacity in our wastewater treatment works or in that wastewater network. And that means we can no longer accept new connections. And the reason that we can't is if the network's at capacity, adding more load into it will see it overwhelmed, and actually you'll have raw sewage escaping into people's homes, their gardens, or water courses and causing pollution. Now, we're a regulated utility and we work with the utility regulator to define a 6-year programme of work, and that's known as a price control. So our next 6-year price control starts in April and it's called PC21. And our business plan as submitted to the utility regulator sets out a £2 billion capital investment, with £1 billion of that earmarked for wastewater projects. So that's really at the cusp of what's deliverable in terms of having resource and the level of disruption that these large engineering projects cause. So remember, sewers are invariably built in the middle of a road and require a lot of traffic management when you need to dig them up. So we know we have work to do, but we certainly don't want to close down the whole of Northern Ireland while we do it. And I guess bearing in mind that the underinvestment was so prolonged, it really isn't feasible to fix everything in one 6-year price control. So the areas with the green dots are the places that we will have freed up the capacity by the end of the next price control period. And we anticipate a need for an investment programme at this level for the next 12 to 18 years to free up capacity right across Northern Ireland. So if we move on to the next slide. You'll have seen on my previous slide that there was a big red circle over Belfast, and this map then shows the greater Belfast area. And really, it is all those areas where the effluent discharges into Belfast Lough. And the Northern Ireland Environment Agency have designated Belfast Lough a sensitive watercourse, and that means that there needs to be very stringent treatment to protect water quality. And water quality in the lough is believed to be deteriorating, and that is being exacerbated by the fact that the sewers are too small for the population they serve, so they discharge into the watercourses even when it isn't raining. And in addition, the wastewater treatment works in Belfast itself has reached capacity and needs upgrading. So the key to unlocking these capacity and environmental issues is the Living with Water programme, and that's a 10-year investment programme that will systematically upgrade the sewers and the wastewater treatment works to free up capacity. It's approximately £1 billion worth of investment, and we plan to deliver £500 million of that in PC21. So move on to the next slide, please. I guess even virtually, I can sense the frustration, maybe even the anger on this call. How can this have been allowed to happen? It isn't realistic to think that development can just stop. And I absolutely agree with that sentiment. We have set as one of our strategic priorities the need to support economic development. We have been very vocal in calling for investment and why it is important, not to us as the water company, but to the Northern Ireland economy and the people who live here. So I'll share later some of the feedback that we've had from the utility regulator, which is encouraging. In the meantime, it is important that we work with businesses to ensure that we get the most from the infrastructure that we have in place. So recognising the impact development constraints can have, we've set up a team internally to work with developers, and Gary Curran, who'll join me later on the call, has headed that up. The key to making this a success is early engagement. So do please get involved with us. Talk to us well before you seek planning approval. Use the pre-development inquiry process whereby we can look at your plans and where capacity is an issue, which in the majority of areas it will be. Our solutions engineering team will look to see if there are any innovations that can help. So for example, stormwater offsetting. So that's where the developer removes stormwater from the sewer network, making room then for foul. And phasing is another matter to consider. Can the development be phased such that it comes on stream as the network capacity is freed up? So I'll talk a little bit later about our standardised approach to planning, where early engagement might make the difference from a recommendation to refuse planning to a recommendation to approve with conditions. It will be a tricky few years, but we are committed to doing what we can, where we can. If we move on to the next slide, so this is looking at local development plans, and you'll be aware that our councils have been developing LDPs, and these plans hold the economic ambition for each council area. And that ambition requires lots of different enablers, but wastewater infrastructure is definitely one of them. So as I've said, the imperative is now that the Northern Ireland government gets behind the investment programme into this infrastructure. Belfast City Council's plan is going through the independent evaluation phase earlier this month. And when we gave evidence, we talked about working collaboratively with planners and ensuring that development phasing was considered. It isn't ideal that a deficit is developed, but working towards a common understanding of the timing of investment and development will be a useful mitigation. I guess finally, the ask really is with the politicians. They do need to prioritise this investment. The council has ambitious plans for the city, and they do require that there is underpinning infrastructure. So if we move on. So while we're talking about councils and working with councils, we've also standardised our approach to planning applications, and that underpins the importance of the pre-development inquiry process. So in essence, if we haven't worked with you and there is no capacity in an area, we will have to recommend that planning is refused, albeit with an offer to explore options. If we've worked with you and we've identified a solution, then we'll recommend that planning is approved with conditions. I suppose just a final reality check is to say that in some instances you may have gone through a pre-development inquiry phase with us and we may not be able to identify a solution, and if that happens to be the case, we would recommend that planning is refused. Next slide. So I guess in reality, successfully enabling economic growth here is about willingness to invest. And what this slide is trying to convey is that in the 6 years from 2015 to 2021, government wasn't willing to invest. Against a total need of £2.8 billion, the government set out an intention to allocate less than that at £990 million. And year-on-year spending cuts have seen about £930 million invested. And that's really a key factor in why we have inadequate infrastructure. But on a more positive note, we set out in our business plan for the next 6 years a series of investments that starts to address that shortfall. And you can see that whilst the overall investment need has grown, our business plan is seeking to deliver over £2 billion worth of capital investment across Northern Ireland. And that's a really positive development. It does need the backing of government and political backing. If we move on to the next slide. So this is where we're up to with our business plan. The utility regulator have given an initial view, which is known as a draft determination, and they'll follow that up with a final determination. But broadly speaking, they understand and they support the need for additional investment. They're calling out that without that investment, society will have to choose between environmental protection and economic development. They have specifically identified that development constraints are an area of concern that needs prioritised. And finally, and very importantly, they want to ensure that the tariffs paid for water and wastewater services remain stable and are not subject to large levels of volatility. So what I want to do now is to play another short video, an animation this time, and this is really the first chance that I've had to speak publicly about much of what's contained in the video and about our climate change plans. I believe that we can play a key role in Northern Ireland's decarbonisation journey, and one that extends far beyond our own interests as a water and wastewater provider. So let's just start off with that video. Neil, if you can.
We are facing a climate emergency, and in an emergency, we need to get things done. So what can Northern Ireland Water deliver to help? In summary, Northern Ireland Water can play a strategically important role in helping society to decarbonise by planting 1 million trees, helping to reduce Northern Ireland's requirement for fossil fuel generated electricity by building more renewables on its land, playing a pivotal role in doubling Northern Ireland's renewable generating capacity, opening a network of green fuel stations to kickstart our hydrogen economy, helping the gas network remain relevant in a decarbonising world, providing sources of warmth for district heating schemes. And we can make nearly all of this happen using third-party funding, whilst at the same time lowering costs for water and electricity customers. In this video, we are going to consider how NI Water can plant 1 million trees and help to reduce Northern Ireland's requirement for fossil fuel generated electricity. As the second biggest landowner in Northern Ireland, we want to deliver a large-scale planting programme of 1 million trees. Working with the Woodland Trust and Forest Service to harness their expertise and existing funding mechanisms, we can deliver a diverse range of native trees to encourage our flowers and fauna to flourish. Our 1 million trees will capture carbon, mitigate floods, and improve our environment. Northern Ireland Water can also help reduce our requirement for fossil fuel generated electricity and cut our society's harmful CO2 emissions. This can be done by working with planners and the local community to strategically place renewable generation at a select number of suitable sites. With third-party expertise and funding, this could deliver as much as 200 megawatts of output, equivalent to a third of a local power station's capacity. The income from leasing the associated land will also generate around £2 to £3 million of income per annum, helping to keep the cost of water services down and easing the funding pressure for government. So, using Northern Ireland Water's land can help to generate more green energy, but we need to do more, much more. NI Water, delivering what matters.
Thanks for that, Neil. So look, there's much to take in there. Some of it's simple and some of it's complex, but let's just remind ourselves why NI Water should be in the middle of all this. I suppose, to be fair, that my interest started with a desire to save money by using less electricity and cutting our electricity bill. And that soon morphed into embracing the need to reduce our operational carbon, which led us on a journey where we now see that our assets can be used to reduce carbon throughout the whole of Northern Ireland. So the planting 1 million trees, well, we've already started working on that with the Woodland Trust on land in the Moors. Facilitating renewables on our land, again, that'll be a fairly simple mix of building our own. We have a 6 megawatt solar farm on the shores of Lough Neagh, and then opening our land to third-party developers. The potential exists to host the largest wind farm in Northern Ireland, some 200 megawatts of wind, which would be the equivalent to a third of a conventional power station. The next 2 bars in this slide is where things get really interesting. We know that Northern Ireland wants to double the amount of generation from renewable sources. We know that wind will be the prevalent source, and I guess there are 2 factors to consider with wind. The wind can drop, but our power consumption needs don't. And conversely, actually, wind blows both day and night, but here in Northern Ireland, we don't use much power at night. So wind energy is currently being wasted at night, and that isn't a sustainable business model for developers. So where does Northern Ireland Water come into play? Well, on a couple of fronts. Firstly, we have over 3,000 grid connections, and some of them are high capacity. That's a very valuable commodity. Those grid connections could be reused in reverse to support the network if there was energy storage installed on our sites. And what form would that energy storage take? Well, it could be batteries, or it could be hydrogen, which is another really interesting proposition. Hydrogen can be produced by electrolyzing water or the final effluent from our wastewater treatment process, and the byproduct from that is oxygen. Now, oxygen is used in the wastewater treatment process. It encourages the good bugs to eat the bad bugs and actually cleans the water. So we think that the oxygen might actually help to increase capacity at our works, so that would allow more waste to be treated in the existing footprint, and we're testing that theory at the minute. Now, electrolyzers are very energy-hungry pieces of equipment, but if they run at night using the surplus energy from the wind farms, we might have created a virtuous circle. So green energy powers an electrical load that produces hydrogen, which in turn can be used for energy storage for release when the green energy is unavailable. And an added benefit is that the oxygen isn't vented to the atmosphere. It's fed into a wastewater treatment process, increasing its capacity. And I guess, did you know, right across Northern Ireland, no matter where you are, we will have a wastewater treatment work situated close to all those major urban settings, which of course makes sense. But this could become a network green fueling stations, either for hydrogen, for the larger vehicles, or potentially acting as fast charge points for electric vehicles, making use of those high capacity grid connections. And still, we're not done. The hydrogen that is produced in an electrolyzer could be used for storage, it could be used for fueling HGVs, or it could be used for decarbonising the town gas network. So natural gas is a bit of a misnomer because it's not actually a green fuel, it's mainly methane. And research that's currently being undertaken is showing that that gas can be greened by introducing hydrogen to it. So there's another potential. And yet more opportunity. We are all so much more aware now of heat pumps. Well, the wastewater process contains heat, which could be harnessed to heat homes or businesses, or to heat greenhouses for food production, a truly low carbon solution. So I guess there's a world of opportunity, and we could talk about each of those projects in their own right for quite some time. But if I just move on, our strapline in NI Water is delivering what matters. And I'm really delighted to share with you this morning that our hydrogen musings are more than just a theory. We are taking steps to put that into practice here in Belfast. So as many cities seek to unlock and support an instant hydrogen economy, so too here, our Department for the Economy has provided funding for Northern Ireland Water to install a pilot-sized electrolyser in Belfast. So that will produce both hydrogen and oxygen and enables us to value the benefits of both. We're in mid-procurement now for the electrolyser and have been having initial conversations with those who may have an interest in the hydrogen. It's a bold step taking the lead on what isn't just decarbonisation, but could truly be green growth, because there are carbon benefits, but there's also economic growth potential. Here in Northern Ireland, we have a fantastic manufacturing base. Is there an opportunity for the engineering knowledge that has been developed in the aerospace industry over the years to become involved in electrolyser manufacture? There really probably is. So if we move on to the next slide. Over the past 20 minutes or so, we've been on a bit of a journey together, and in terms of leaving you with some final thoughts, I hope that you can hear our commitment to supporting economic growth. An investment deficit has been allowed to develop here, but Northern Ireland Water has set out its largest ever investment plan to address that. The step change in investment needed is recognised by the utility regulator, and now the Northern Ireland Executive owns the decisions around what it will and what it won't fund. I am very encouraged by some of the priorities that we see in the draft programme for government, and I'm hopeful that all our work in raising awareness of investment need will pay off. I guess finally, I want to leave you with the notion that having a sustainable and a viable water company has benefits that far outweigh our services or indeed the availability of our infrastructure. The potential to support a green growth agenda that delivers tangible outputs is real and very significant. And I suppose with that note of hope and optimism, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Sarah, thank you very much for that. That was brilliant, and a really brilliant insight into, I think, a business that a lot of people, as you said, use day in, day out, multiple times each day, but don't, I think, have that appreciation just of the huge breadth of what Northern Ireland Water does and those ambitious plans, which I'm sure we'll get on to as we chat now. So we're also joined by your colleague Gary Curran, who is heads of Northern Ireland Water's developer services. Can I maybe start off? There's quite a few questions have already come in, and anybody who wants to pose a question to Sarah or to Gary, please do so in the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to get through that as many as we possibly can. But Sarah, I was on a call last week. It was an event. It was CBRE's market outlook for the year, and their guest speaker was their head of research, a guy called Spencer Levy, said that the most productive piece of infrastructure may be the one that you cannot see. And throughout our series over the last couple of weeks, we've looked at Ulster University's new campus, which is nearly finished. It's months away from occupation. It's very visible in the city skyline. Transport Hub was last week's focus. It's on site and it'll develop over the next 3 years. And these are tangible assets, very visible assets. What you do, most of what you do is less so. So in terms of Belfast and its economy, how does Northern Ireland Water enable our economy to function within Northern Ireland? How are you that enabler for growth?
Thank you. It's a really good question, and that fact of all our assets being hidden has been a strength and a great weakness, especially when we come for funding. But I guess there are some obvious ways and some less obvious. So if I start with the obvious, the service in themselves are an enabler. So they're a fundamental enabler, granted as well they should be, but there are very few businesses that can trade without a supply of water and the ability to have their wastewater removed. But layer on top of that, Northern Ireland Water is an employer. So we have 1,300 staff at present, and we expect to see those numbers increase in a very significant way as we ramp up our investment programme. So just this month, we started 30 new apprentices. And on top of that, we have a range of occupations. So from engineers to scientists, to data analysts, accountants, HR professionals, IT specialists that are all recently recruited or being recruited. And our teams are headquartered in North Belfast. And we have operational sites in the harbour estate as well as a customer service centre in the city centre in Belfast. And then there's the impact of our capital investment programme. So not only will it enable growth with the capacity that it provides, but it also provides employment for a range of professions here in Northern Ireland, keeping that work here. The University of Ulster did some research showing that for every pound that we invest, the impact on the economy is more than double. So even in this year, £170 million of investment is a lot of impact. And I guess at the end, I finished off looking at climate change, and I believe we're only scraping the surface of the beneficial impact that we can have in that area. I think that we will help define green growth in Northern Ireland, and that has started right here in Belfast. So lots of different ways in which we will enable economic growth.
Thanks, Sara. I think one of the big issues to come through in your presentation was around funding. No one could help but escape that aspect of what you were saying, and hugely ambitious plans. Growth depends on that investment, and I'm sure we'll get into that a bit later as well. How confident are you that you will be able to get the funding that you need to be able to realize that vision and that ambition? That it's obviously so crucial to helping Belfast to realize its growth targets, which you referenced, which include 66,000 new homes within the Belfast area over the next 15 years, which is a hugely ambitious target, but requires that sort of development and the connections that you're applying, and therefore you deliver, and therefore it requires that funding that you were talking about. How confident are you?
Well, yeah, I know that's the $1 million question, isn't it? The fact of the matter is, I suppose,
if it was $1 million, it might be easier to deal with. But yes, I know what you mean.
$2 billion pound question. So, look, the underinvestment didn't happen overnight, and I guess as we, have worked our way into this, our board has come up with a strategy that really places economic growth right at the heart of what it is that we're about. So we've spent time, we've listened to what business needs. We've talked to our politicians over years, and indeed others have been doing likewise. Our councils, our local business groups, our local industry groups. And then the utility regulator have an important role to play here, because they independently scrutinise our plan, but they're supporting the need for that increased investment. And then if I look at the draft programme for government that has been published, the outcomes that are contained within it will only be delivered if water and wastewater infrastructure is in place. So for me, these are all very encouraging signals, but I'm not complacent. The politicians serve the communities that they represent, so they need to hear from those communities, and they need to hear from everybody on this call that this investment is important to the economic outcomes, to people's lives. And so I would encourage, we'll keep talking, and I would encourage everybody on the call to keep doing that. But I suppose there is an air of inevitability. I mean, I see no logical reason for continued underfunding. Quite simply would be cutting off our nose to spite our face. So I'm quite hopeful that the stars are aligning, and this is the right time to get after this.
Yeah, and I was going to ask there, what can we as a business community in Belfast, when you look at the maps that you put up, and you see quite large red dots and colouring in of red and various boundaries around wastewater treatment works in Belfast, is an obvious imperative for many of our members to support what you're saying. How practically can we do that? And we've had a few questions as well around it. I suppose sometimes this debate ends up sort of descending very, very quickly. Certainly when it's held in a media context, it heads very, very quickly to domestic water charging. But obviously that's not something that I'm encouraging maybe to get into too much here. But obviously there are other options beyond that in terms of how that investment hole could be plugged.
Yes, and it really is a matter for the executive in many regards, and that debate around will charging cure everything. Part of the cure is if the executive want to make the money available, we simply ask for a funded solution, and if the executive want to make the money available, they have the means to do that. They just have to allow us to get on with the investment. So it isn't the case that the borrowing is the blocker. We have access to money. We just need permission to spend, and that's the piece that we're working with the politicians on. You asked about Belfast and the specifics and some of the questions that are coming up in the Q&A screen. I think one of the key things is don't sit on something and come and talk to us. So maybe would it be useful to have Gary to introduce what it means to talk about that pre-development inquiry and how that's helpful for developers?
Yeah, that would be useful. And Gary, maybe when you're doing that, we've had a couple of points there have been raised by folk around the process, and whether having seen those maps, whether historic and pre-approved applications will still be honoured. Of queries around the Some developers have raised issues around the cost of connections and whether that's then connected to the capacity issue. So there's a couple of points which would be, I think, as well as sort of outlining that process, I think that would be quite helpful.
Yes, certainly. And I think to sort of re-emphasize what Sarah's already said, the alignment of the high level plans is critical, and funding is one element of it, but timing is also key as well, and making sure that we're aligned from a timing perspective. But at the next level down is really what I'm specifically looking at in terms of sort of tactical engagement with specific developments and so on. And the team I have, we're looking at innovative ways to sort of mitigate the impact of the constraints that are out there. And that really ties in quite neatly with the sort of theme of sustainability and so on, where, we're sort of looking at, buildings, the reuse of buildings that have been repurposed and so on. They obviously would have an existing loading on the network that we can take into consideration and so on. A lot of development also in Belfast is likely to be around brownfield sites, so reusing existing sites and repurposing those in a sustainable way. And obviously we can work with developers on that to see what, as Sarah mentioned, stormwater, maybe we could separate from our combined system to try and free up capacity and so on. And then sort of there was a specific question there about approved planning. So if a site has approved planning, we will honour that. We will, I suppose, endeavour to look at opportunities to try and remove stormwater as well, or improve mitigate the loading on our network. But if a site has approved planning, well, we will honour that and will connect it. And we have allowed for that sort of growth within some of our projections and so on. I think there's probably a bit of concern that the cost of this isn't really sustainable for the developer. And I mean, those innovative measures and so on that we've been looking at aren't necessarily cost prohibitive. The pilot work that we've done to date would suggest otherwise, actually, and stormwater offsetting, it's probably one of the key things that we're looking at. And really what we're looking for there is, for example, if a car park, a large hard stand area, is discharging directly into our combined sewer, we simply separate that out and direct it towards a water course. So it doesn't necessarily have to be really cost prohibitive. I say timing as well. It may be that I can come up with some sort of innovative solution that will allow the first phase of a development to go ahead, acknowledging that following up will be the capital works project that will ultimately give the resolution to the overall project. So timing is key, and the point that Sarah was at pains to emphasize there was engage with us early. We can start looking at those solutions as early as possible and give a feel for what may or may not be possible and the likely cost impact of that as well. So I suppose my message today is come and talk to us, and we will endeavour to work with developers on that.
Thanks for that, Gary, and I'm sure that you're more than happy to talk to anybody who has been, as you say, that quite a few questions related to this have come in, and specific questions. So it might be useful if people want to pick that up with you afterwards. I'm sure you're more than happy to do that. And if anybody wants to contact Belfast Chamber, we can certainly pass them on to Gary and the team. And the phrase catchy, snappy, easy to remember, no drains, no cranes is quite impactful. I suppose one interpretation of that could almost say that's quite negative, and pessimistic. And Sarah, you deliberately said you didn't want to be that way about it. So I mean, it's almost a sort of a message of it's not impossible, but it's challenging, and that without that level of investment over the next decade or so, then it is certainly going to present a big challenge. So this is something that it's not going to go away, as you said. So it needs attention. And it is certainly going to have some impact, it's fair to say, on some of those big investment plans that we have for the city. So that's why it's imperative that we get this dealt with.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it has had impact, and the fact that the development community is having to think innovatively with us it's impacting on what used to be maybe a much more straightforward process for them. And I am really sorry I can't take that away from them. To be honest, it isn't for the want of talking about it, and it goes back to that you can't see it, and when you couldn't see it, you couldn't cut a ribbon to open it, but actually spending the money and investing in an increased capacity in a sewer was probably one of the best things that could be done for a town or a city. And the hope, I guess, you have to have positivity. The positivity is there's a set of plans ready to go. We're probably at a point in our economic development here in Northern Ireland that we want to have lots of infrastructure work that keeps our civil engineers, our designers, our young people, our construction industries busy, and actually that potential is there. So things are coming together. We know what we need to do. We're ready to go, and I think there's a labour market there to support it. So I think the key thing now is let's get on with it. We work in collaboration with people, and we try our best to match timing. It won't happen all the time, so there is a little bit of give and take. But I suppose we don't have a time machine, and we can't go back 10 years and reverse the decisions that were taken then. So we just have to move forward.
Thanks for that. It's a big issue, and one of, as you can see from the engagement that we've had there from various questions around this issue, that it's something that obviously our members are very mindful of. Can I pick up your fascinating plans around climate change and sustainability? And again, there's been a huge interest in that. It's interesting to find out that you're the second largest landowner in Northern Ireland. Makes many of us think, who's the largest landowner then in Northern Ireland?
I think it's the Crown.
Right, okay. And I've obviously saw in the video as well Silent Valley, which is a wonderful tourism asset as well. And it is a very ambitious vision as well in terms of carbon reduction. And I mean, this is something that has come through in the series. It's been a bit of a theme that we have deliberately focused on, and that our members like Translink last week have talked quite extensively about. And it's interesting to have that sort of symmetry that you were talking about with the hydrogen with Translink. Is that something that was already part of your plans, or has it been accelerated as a result of the events of the last year, or is it a kind of a combination of both?
Well, it's always been part of our plans. So people probably never realised, and certainly when I didn't work in the water industry, the close, deep connection with the environment that we have and with nature. And as we started to develop our strategy, we could see that economy was a key cornerstone, but nature was also a key cornerstone. And that's what developed the thinking. And I said in my presentation, selfishly, I went into this to save money. I wanted to cut my electricity bill. £30 million is a lot. So we wanted to cut our bill. But as we read into it, that's when we started to realise this fantastic potential that we have. And the fact that we are publicly owned probably makes it an even more exciting opportunity for Northern Ireland. So here we are in the heart of Northern Ireland. We're publicly owned. We have all these assets. We have all these grid connections. We could, the hydrogen economy is something that all governments are trying to kickstart. It becomes much more expensive if you have to get a grid connection. But actually, if you site it at a wastewater treatment works where you have a grid connection, done deal. If you take the oxygen into the process, done deal. Electrolyzers themselves are very hard to come by. What if you manufactured them here in Northern Ireland? So you're growing and growing. That whole area of heat and the heat that comes from these wastewater treatment works, what if that heat was captured and fed to greenhouses? And the greenhouses were producing food that we used here. So again, that's sustainable. What are the next developments in farming? Post Brexit, etc., etc. So there's great opportunity there. And I think I've seen a question in the chat around the hydrogen and the size. So the unit that we're building now in conjunction with the Department for the Economy is a 1 megawatt unit. It would produce enough hydrogen for about 14 vehicles. So it really is only a pilot, and the contributor is absolutely right. In order for this to work, it will be much bigger and much more at scale. And that is, the question of where that investment comes from. There are lots of actually people willing to invest in this as as a technology. And I think it's a wee bit chicken and egg. You have to break in, you have to prove it. So what government's doing here is they're supporting us to prove the technology. We'll get a few vehicles on the road. There are a number of people who are interested. So TransLink, will be right beside the pilot demonstrator, and they have a big order for hydrogen buses in. We're going to convert a few vehicles ourselves, and we are talking to a number of other people who are interested. So this is phase one, and this could be the thing that unlocks it. And actually, Northern Ireland have a fantastic potential here to become a real leader in that as an industry. And so many uses for it. So it could be energy storage, it could fuel vehicles, it could green the gas network, all of which will be beneficial to us, because what's going to happen is someone's going to come knocking our door in Northern Ireland and say, show me your net zero plan, and we're going to have one.
Did you say you had a £30 million electricity bill?
Yes.
My goodness, I've sort of feared that I've started to turn into my dad in recent years in more ways than one, and one is shouting at the kids when the lights are left on, but I'll maybe just go a bit gentler on them after hearing that figure.
Well, you need to do a lot more than turn off lights to save money there. So, I mean, and absolutely. That's because you can see none of our infrastructure, but a lot of water gets pumped, a lot of wastewater gets pumped, and all those wastewater treatment works, air gets bubbled in. So, big consumer of electricity.
And that it seems to be a huge driver in that, and the hydrogen project it sounds absolutely fascinating, because that's come up now 2 weeks in a row in this series, and obviously having that linkage and connection to TransLink is important in that. As this moves forward, are there options? Obviously, there'll be potential for businesses across the region to get involved in that, but also you mentioned the sort of on the vehicle side of things, is there opportunities to partner with businesses to consume some of that energy that's produced? Is that something that you're open to conversations about in the next period?
Well, I think so. I think very much so, but I actually think that probably, as this goes on and mushrooms, government will have a big role to play. So I think what we're setting out is the potential of all our assets. To give some comfort to all the developers, we will be very much focused on running a water and wastewater business and on providing capacity and all the services that we provide. Should we become part of a bigger Northern Ireland solution for net carbon zero, I think there'll be a role then for that element of government who will be driving that forward to partner with us and to use those assets. So I'm not necessarily setting Northern Ireland Water up as, you come to me to get a fast charge connection point, or that our profits will necessarily be boosted by selling electricity to people to charge their cars. But I think that we would absolutely be working with government to try and make all those facilities available rather than have people pay for it twice.
Sure. That's helpful. I know there's a huge emphasis on sustainability at the moment, and more so probably over this next year with change in the White House and COP 26, and it'll be a big topic of conversation as the year goes on. Well, you're saying that that those plans are incredibly ambitious and very much aligned with that type of agenda, but in a practical way, how are you seeing? You mentioned potential hose pipe bans and so for a couple of days where you would be threatened with a hose pipe ban at this moment in time, but you are getting generally wetter winters, and it's the temperature, although it didn't really feel like this at stages over the weekend, but the temperatures tend to be on average a bit higher, and then you get those sort of drier. So is there a practical challenge that you're facing year on year, which is greater and greater than it was, say, 10 or 20 years ago?
Yeah, and I think we all see that. So climate change is having an impact. So we get so much more frequent, heavy rainstorms, which impacts on that sewer network, and you get your out of sewer flooding. And the dry period that we had from March through last year, literally, if you did get out on your walks around any of the reservoirs, they were very, very low. Now, there's two sides to that. There is the side of one of the tasks that we have is dealing with profligate waste. So less than 4% of the water, all the water that goes to your house, is treated for drinking. It's of the highest standard, is of better quality than bottled water. Less than 4% of it gets drank. And what was happening last year is was just being wasted. I was out for walks and fields were being hosed down. Sprinklers were on, hosing fields. That's drinking water. And it's, you know, it was drinking water at a time where the raw material wasn't coming in. Reservoirs are holes in the ground. They're only of a certain size. So if people waste water, they won't have it. And so one of the things that here in Northern Ireland, I think we do have to deal with is that wasting of water. You don't always have to use drinking water to clean your car, or you can use a bucket as opposed to a hose. And you certainly do not need to leave a sprinkler on all night, every night, for grass in a garden. That water is far more important for your family. So there's a bit of a combination there. Climate change isn't having an impact, but that waste of water isn't just wasting the water, it's wasting the electricity that went in to pump it, it's wasting the chemicals that went in to treat it. And so there's work for us all there as a society to sort of tackle that and to change our attitudes. We would never, you know, I went into a coffee shop and somebody gave me a cup of coffee in 2 cardboard cups and got annoyed because it was a waste. So we need to get equally as annoyed when people waste water.
Yeah, I think it's a very
That's my
good point.
soapbox.
I think it's a very, very good point, and I think well illustrated. And I think it is perhaps at the core of some of this debate and discussion that, you know, we kind of take it for granted. You know, it falls from the sky, we think, and we don't really appreciate that kind of process that you've outlined today. So I think that's very good points, well made. Mark Geddes, he's from the TES group, has asked a question about the digestion of sewage sludge. Now, I'm going to not expose my ignorance and pretend to know what that is. And he's asking about whether you have any plans for it. I'm glad that it's well after breakfast time that I'm asking a question about sewage sludge, but is that something that Northern Ireland Water is doing or is looking at doing?
It's very interesting. It's a great question, Mark. And so actually when I joined NI Water, they talk about sewage sludge, but they also talk about sludge cake. So that just put me off chocolate cake for life. But in terms of sludge, so sludge is what is left at the end of the wastewater process, and it is a fantastic fuel, a fuel like no other actually, and you can generate electricity for it. So in Northern Ireland, what happened 10, 15 years ago is, again, down to money. We hadn't the money to upgrade all our wastewater treatment works and to deal with that sludge. So a large contract was formed, and all that sludge is contracted to a third party. So a third party is contractually entitled to all our sludge. They take it and they incinerate it in Duncrew. And we do get some electricity generation from that incineration, but as a result, we don't have access to our sludge at this point in time to digest it. But that contract will come to an end, and the sludge strategy, actually, as we call it, is something that then we'll be looking forward to when we get access to our sludge again. And digestion absolutely is one of those options whereby, again, back to your circular economy, you will have the sludge, you can take nutrients from the sludge, you can take energy from the sludge, and drive down your carbon footprint. So we can't do it right now today because we are contractually obliged to give that to a third party. They do incinerate it, and there is some energy generation from it, but there's the potential for a whole lot more.
Sludge cake and sludge strategies. We're learning every day here. I should have put this presentation on homeschooling timetable today. It's very, very informative. Maybe ask just one final question before we wrap up, and it's from Justin McHenry at View City, who are based down around the Queen's area in Belfast, and it's a good one about mapping and spatial planning around, you know, getting. And I know that Northern Ireland Water has a huge amount of data and good maps around, you know, where its pipelines are, and that has, you know, I think that has presented some challenges over the years for you to get that accurate. And he's asking about, you know, that having broader sort of connected utility data maps for Northern Ireland Water, NIE, telephone networks, and so forth in one single platform, and how that might be useful in developing a smart city and spatial planning. You know, have you looked at anything like that with other partners around spatial planning and mapping of the city and I suppose the whole region?
So, I mean, it's certainly a conversation we'd be delighted to have. We have fantastic GIS, Geographic Information System, and it does link into other systems. So, for example, the team have being able to take our system with our network, layer on our investment plans, and then talk to the planners and start to layer on where planning applications are happening. So in our discussions with councils, we're able to even time model and say, so here's where we're at today and everything's in the red. Here's it turning, here's the investment showing the network capacity being freed up, and here's where your planning applications are coming in. So yes, digital technology is a super opportunity for us all, and we'd be more than happy to pick up with Justin. We do quite a bit actually, and we have a fantastic wealth of digital information, and we're doing a lot of really exciting stuff in that area again, which, you know, back to how is the water company an enabler. It's not just engineers, you know, it's data scientists. We're using that sort of machine learning to help interrogate data and even control networks. So some fantastic opportunities out there.
Brilliant. That's great, and it's good to see the sun coming out there.
I know, I had to put the blind down.
Hopefully, maybe that is the start of a thread of a hosepipe ban.
Not yet. No, we're full to the neck.
So, can I thank you, Sarah, and Gary, on behalf of everybody? I think that was absolutely fantastic and then really insightful in terms of getting that sense of the full extent of the business. It isn't just a matter of turning the tap on and water coming out. And I think a lot of us do genuinely take that for granted, that, you know, every time we turn on the tap, 99.999% of times the water comes out. And, you know, to see a little bit about all that goes into that and the full extent of the work the team does. So thank you very much for that. And obviously there are huge challenges there for you as an organization and a business and for wider society. So I think it's useful to have that debate aired and talked about, and certainly in terms of those conversations with developers and the challenges that presents. I'm very, very happy to connect folk to Gary and the team if that's required. And there'll be a few queries about the slides from the presentation, and if it's okay with you, we'll share those with everybody.
Love to do that, yeah, absolutely. And any questions that we haven't answered, we're happy to pick up as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So on behalf of everybody, can I thank you, Sarah, and Northern Ireland Water and the whole team for your time, not just today, but in preparing for today as well. Can I also, on everybody's behalf, thank all of the contributors to our Building Belfast Back Better series, so to Ulster University, to Translink, and to KPMG for their fascinating presentations over the last 4 weeks. So thank you to everybody for taking part. Can I also thank once again Power NI for their support for the series? It wouldn't have been possible without that. So thank you to Ian and the team at Power NI for coming alongside Belfast Chamber to deliver this series of events. Thank you to Neil and the team as well at ND Events for also helping us to make sure that this has run incredibly smoothly over the last 4 weeks. And that just leads to me to thank all of you for attending and for registering and for viewing online. This event, like all of them, will be made available on our YouTube channel later on today, hopefully. So please feel free to share with friends and colleagues as well. So thank you all for attending. We hope that you have enjoyed it and also find it informative. We will have an extensive calendar of events throughout the rest of the year. Looks like many of those will continue to be online for the foreseeable future. So keep an eye on our events calendar on belfastchamber.com. We have an event on the Friday the 26th of February with Belfast City Council entitled Belfast Our Recovery. So details of that will be available online very soon, and you can register for that, and also for some of those other events that we'll be putting on the website in the next few days. So thank you once again, everybody, for your attendance, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks.